We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Claff. We are here at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday because for as many times as we say we're live every Wednesday at 11 a.m., we hardly ever are.
Yeah.
We usually are.
It never works out that way.
It doesn't work
Last
out
week
as
it
often
did.
as I would like it to.
Right.
So today we are live at 10 a.m. for some different scheduling reasons, and we have a lot to get into today. Some injuries, some guys coming back from injury, a lot of roster moves. But first, Annie, I need to start with a softball update.
Uh-oh.
Longtime listeners of the show will know that myself and longtime host and friend of the podcast, Paul Mancano, play rec softball sometimes when the weather is nice here in lovely Baltimore. And on Monday, we played a game. And if you listen to the Banner Baseball show, you may already know about this podcast, but it bears repeating because it was so bad, this softball game. We go into the final inning of play, and there's a rule in this softball league where you can only score 5 runs in an inning unless you go into the last inning of play and you are down by fewer than 5 runs.
Sure.
Because then you get unlimited runs, and it wouldn't make sense if you can only score 5, then the other team could come back and score 5, whatever. So we go into the last inning of play. We're winning at this point. I think we're up 11-8, something like that. We get 3 outs. It's 11-10. They come back up, and they have unlimited runs. Would you like to know the final score of this game? That we were winning 11-10 going into the final inning.
Let's hear it.
It was 33-11.
My
33-11. It was unbelievable. I had never seen anything like it. Every single ball they hit found grass. We had some terrible errors. The baseball IQ for our team, I've got some questions about it, quite frankly. It was one of the worst things that has happened to me on a baseball field or a softball field.
With that kind of final score, I'm kind of surprised you guys made it to 11 and were in the lead.
We were winning. We played a good game.
How does
for
that
the majority of the game? I have no idea how it happened in the final inning. We apparently decided to stop playing defense. Like I said, just every hard hit ball found grass somewhere. We got babbipped to death, as some Orioles would like to say. So I don't know. It was bad. 33-11. They put up 20-plus runs in the final inning.
Maybe you should stick to basketball, Brendan.
Maybe I should, but my basketball team's 0-3 too, so maybe I'm the problem.
Maybe you should go back to
in
soccer.
These rec sports. Maybe listen, I may be the problem in basketball. I don't think I'm the problem in softball. I was definitely the problem in rec soccer. That I can safely say.
I will not comment to that
Thank
statement.
you. That's enough of an answer there. But all right, enough about softball. If I've learned one thing from my years of hosting this show, it's that listeners absolutely hate the softball updates, but we had to do it anyway.
I am 0-1 in my softball career.
That's true.
And
you showed up to about one softball game last year.
One Birdland softball game last year. For the record, I was still commuting from home, so about an hour and a half away.
True.
And I wasn't going to commute all the way.
Yeah, you
for
weren't
it to get
dedicated to
out.
the game.
Well, it got rained out like 90% of the time.
That is another thing about
that
this
is
softball
why
league. It gets rained out
showed up
90% of the time. If it rains within the last calendar month, we are not playing softball.
But I did play your team, and we lost.
That's true.
Heavily.
That's why I'm not the issue in softball, and I wasn't the issue this time. All right, let's talk Orioles.
We digress.
We digress. There are a lot of things to get to. Do we start with the injuries or just the roster moves in general? We're going to get to the returns of Jordan Westburg and Cedric Mullins and Ramon Laureano, who we have not had the chance to talk about, even though he's been back for a bit. So I guess we'll start with the injuries, get into the broader roster moves, and then we'll talk about the good stuff there. So, injury updates. Jorge Mateo hits the injured list yesterday with left elbow inflammation. My goodness. That is the same elbow that he got Tommy John surgery on after that scary collision at shortstop, second base. He experienced discomfort in that elbow after a collision with Heston Kjerstad on May 31st, but there was no structural damage in Mateo's elbow this time around, so it just sounds like some inflammation and discomfort, and there's not an exact timeline for his return. Truthfully, does not change a lot of the equation for the Orioles. Jorge Mateo, we know the value that he brings off the bench as a pinch runner, as a defensive replacement late in games. He wasn't going to get a ton of starts now that the Orioles were getting a little bit more healthy. He was making some kind of emergency starts in center field. He's not a natural center fielder, but he has the speed and athleticism to play out there and was trying to get his reps in. So when Cedric Mullins and Colton Cowser and Laureano were all injured, we saw Mateo in the outfield a little bit. But given how healthy the Orioles are right now, I don't think this injury makes a massive difference in terms of who's getting starts day to day and playing time. But Mateo still provides value off the bench, as I mentioned, as that pinch runner defensive replacement type. And it's still a valuable piece to have there that the Orioles will miss.
Yeah, definitely, like you mentioned, not one of the most notable injuries and roster moves here is Jorge Mateo hitting the IL. But it is somewhat scary when you think about that weird collision last season with Gunnar Henderson and then another collision to the same elbow. You really are scared to hear that happen, that situation happen. So we're wishing Jorge Mateo all the best with that kind of recovery, and hopefully it's just a short IL stint, nothing too major, just hopefully some bruising inflammation on that elbow. Tony Mansolino said that it was bothering him from time to time since that second collision with Heston Kjerstad. That happened on May 31st, but then the injury itself wasn't retroactive until June 7th, so there was clearly some kind of lingering pain there. But with that, Luis Vasquez gets called up from AAA Norfolk. This was a guy that was playing really well in spring training, and maybe there was some conversation about him breaking camp if Jorge Mateo didn't, but Jorge Mateo eventually did. And like you mentioned, even with Jorge Mateo, the way he was playing offensively and defensively, he was getting stretched out a lot to playing center field, playing in the outfield when that isn't his normal position. And so he wasn't really providing much on either side of the ball on offense or defense. So you still wish him the best, but it is a bit of a minor injury call than some other names.
Yeah. Jorge Mateo has a very specific role, and it doesn't impact a lot of starts day to day, but it's still a role that the Orioles feel like is valuable, or else we wouldn't see Jorge Mateo as often as we do. So Jorge Mateo out for a bit, as mentioned, not sure the exact timeline there. Ryan Mountcastle gets a timeline for his hamstring injury, and unfortunately is a much longer timeline than a lot of people expected. He is out 8 to 12 weeks with a grade 2 hamstring strain. That is a doozy of a hamstring strain. Ouch.
That 8 to 12 weeks is a very, very long time.
Yeah, grade 2.
What is going on with this weird hamstring strain epidemic?
Hamstrings are always just the worst because they always seem to be injuries that linger. I mean, Jordan Westburg had a hamstring injury and then a setback. It just always keeps guys out longer than you think it does, and it is really annoying.
So annoying, and it's been nagging this entire organization through all the levels, too, with Enrique, Bradfield Jr. in AA, and all the guys at the big leagues. It is really an epidemic.
Protect those hamstrings, guys.
Yeah, protect those hammies.
Yeah, all right. Let's go through the roster moves here because there are now a bunch of them, given the injuries and guys coming back from injury as well. Jordan Westburg, reinstated from the injured list. That's a good one. Cedric Mullins, reinstated from the injured list. That's another good one.
That is more than a good one.
Yeah, Ramon Laureano, reinstated from the injured list. He's been back for a bit, but since the last time we podcasted, he's been reinstated. That's another good one. Luis Vasquez, as you mentioned, selected his contract from AAA Norfolk. Heston Kjerstad, optioned to AAA Norfolk with a couple of outfielders coming back. They brought back Scott Bluette. He was DFA'd by the Atlanta Braves. The Orioles trade for him, and they DFA'd Matt Bowman. They kind of do the same thing. So one goes out and one leaves. Or one comes in and one leaves. That would be the opposite things. Designated Emmanuel Rivera for assignment, and Jordan Adams cleared waivers and is back in AAA. All right, let's start with some of the moves that we can just kind of touch on quickly, and then we'll move to the big stuff. Adams and Bowman stay in the organization. Yay. That's good. Jordan Adams, good defender in center field. Liked to see him as a defensive replacement late in games when he was up in the big leagues. That's good depth to have. Matt Bowman, he has done some really nice stuff for the Orioles this year. He gives you good length out of the bullpen. We saw him in West Sacramento over the weekend playing the Athletics. When Charlie Morton doesn't have his best game, Matt Bowman comes in and gives you 2 1/3 innings of hitless baseball. That's awesome. Good stuff. Glad he's still in the org. I'm sure we'll see him again at some point. Scott Blewett is here. He had a nice stint in Atlanta. He gives you good length, just like Matt Bowman. As I said, Scott Blewett comes in, Matt Bowman goes out. They kind of do the same thing, but Scott Blewett has put up some nice numbers as well, so good to see him back in the organization.
Yeah, Blewett specifically too. When he comes back to the organization, only 3 2/3 innings pitched so far, but only 2 hits, no earned runs. It's great to see from him as he comes back to the Orioles organization. His last outing with Atlanta wasn't so good, but the 6 before that were scoreless.
Yeah,
so,
he kind of had one blow-up outing with the Braves, but he had an ERA of 3 in 10 or 12 games with Atlanta before that. So I think a lot of Braves folks were pretty surprised that he got DFA'd and the Orioles get to take advantage.
So far, so good for him.
Yeah, so far, so good. Luis Vasquez is here. OPS just shy of 800 in Norfolk. I don't think we're going to see him a ton.
Yeah.
I don't think he is the backup shortstop option. I think that's still probably Jackson Holliday.
Right.
Where if Gunnar Henderson needs a blow, you can move Holliday to shortstop. And then Westburg and Arias can be your third and second baseman in whatever configuration you'd like. But Luis Vasquez, good depth. Good to have him up in the big leagues, and he is a replacement there for Mateo. Doesn't have the same speed as Jorge Mateo, but still good to have him up here. And then Emmanuel Rivera, DFA'd. The OPS was down to 578. I know he wasn't striking out, and the batting average was decent. We saw decent defense from him at third base, not great defense from him at first base. Wasn't hitting for a lot of power. We didn't see a lot of extra base hits. I know he had a good stretch in his first 8-10 games at the beginning of the season, but the numbers have gone pretty downhill since then. So this made the most sense with Jordan Westburg coming back. There was no room at third base for Emmanuel Rivera. Jordan Westburg was here. Ramon Arias is here. One of those two guys is going to be playing third base every single day for this team, assuming that they are healthy. So it was just kind of a circumstance of the roster crunch, but it's the move that made the most sense for the Orioles at this point.
Right, and as much as he came out of the gates when he did get called up the first time this season really well, his last 6 games, like you mentioned, only 1 hit, was not hitting very well towards the end of his most recent stint. But it also is a good sign in a way because it gives Kobe Mayo some more opportunity at first base, because if you kept Emmanuel Rivera in the situation at first base when you have Jordan Westburg and Ramon Arias as those second and third base options, then you also are giving Kobe Mayo some more opportunity at first instead of Emmanuel Rivera taking that chance from him with Ryan Mountcastle on the injured list.
Yeah, and so let's move into that because Ryan Mountcastle's injury, as mentioned, he's out 8 to 12 weeks with that right hamstring strain. It is a grade 2, and Tony Mansolino has said that Kobe Mayo is going to be getting a lot of opportunities at first base. Mansolino also saying that he is going to be a first baseman, and he is really only going to play third base in an emergency situation. As mentioned, the hot corner belongs to Westburg and Arias every single day. I would be shocked if somebody else plays that position at any point if those two guys are healthy. But this is an opportunity for Kobe Mayo, unfortunately, with the injury to Ryan Mountcastle, to prove himself, but it is a good chance to see what one of the top prospects in the system has to offer. And I think Mayo had a good approach to it. We asked him, with the Ryan Mountcastle injury, kind of how he's looking at the situation. And he basically said, yeah, you never want to see anybody go down. Mounty's a great player, and we're going to miss him. But I know that I have a chance to prove myself up here, and so I'm going to try to be the best first baseman I could be. He joked, too, that he probably leads the league in early work because he is out at first base with Mansolino and with Buck Britton, trying to work on his defense there. It's not his primary position, but he's learning, and he's going to hopefully grow into it a little bit.
Right, and it's the whole reason, too, for when he was trying to carve a path for himself to the big leagues of why he started to get more defensive reps at first base instead of just third, because that's the way that it's going to happen for him. And we're seeing that right now where he's focusing more solely on first base than third base because that's where the opportunity is. He's not going to get playing time and steal it from Jordan Westburg at this point. He's going to get it from where there's a hole in the lineup, and that's at Ryan Mountcastle's position in first base. So yes, it is a little bit of, okay, well, third base is his natural position, but there's a reason why he's been practicing first base all the way up through the minor league system and up until now.
Yeah, and the talk about Coby Mayo really throughout his minor league career was that he was probably going to transition over to first base at some point. Now, all the credit in the world to Coby Mayo, as he continued to, grow from a drafted high schooler into a professional ball player, he still played well at third base, well enough to be able to play it into AAA Norfolk and in the big leagues, where the Orioles were still thinking, okay, this guy can be a third baseman at the big league level. I'm not saying that is completely out of the question for Coby Mayo, but I think it could be a Ryan Mountcastle type of situation where it's an athletic guy. Mountcastle was drafted as a shortstop, and then we saw him at third base, and then we saw him in the outfield, and then we saw him at first base. And now Ryan Mountcastle has turned into one of the best defensive first basemen in baseball because he is an athletic player that has been all over the diamond in his career, and now he settles at first, and he's a great athlete over there. And I think Coby Mayo could do the same thing where, yeah, he probably didn't profile as an elite third baseman, but it's a good arm. He's a good athlete. And there are plenty of reasons to believe that if he transitions over to first base and figures out how to play that position just, from a coaching perspective of, you need to stand here, you're a cutoff man for this, he'll learn those kinds of things, but he's a good enough athlete to be a really good defensive first baseman if that's where he ends up.
And this is probably going to be his longest stint in the big leagues thus far. So it is really crucial for Coby Mayo right now to prove himself on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. When you look at Ryan Mountcastle's injury, yes, it is a really tough blow. It's difficult to look at it as a tough blow right now because of his offensive struggles. But again, like you mentioned, he is far and away your best defensive first baseman option. This season, he's in the 79th percentile for outs above average. His offense was very interesting because his bat speed is in the 91st percentile, but it wasn't necessarily translating enough to get the results.
Right.
What's very interesting is Coby Mayo's StatCast page and Ryan Mountcastle's StatCast pages are actually pretty similar. They have very similar metrics at the plate. I'm going to read some of them off. Mounty's bat speed is 75.2. Mayo's is 73.9. Mounty's hard hit rate is 46.5%, and Mayo's is 47.8%. Mayo is better at chasing rates, but strikes out more than Mountcastle. They have very similar whiff rates, squared up rates. They are very similar in terms of at the plate metrics. Obviously, this is a no-brainer that Mayo's sample size is much smaller, and he doesn't even qualify for half of those numbers yet because it has only been a small sample size of him in the big leagues. But this is what we've seen so far from Mayo, and there's going to be more progress from him. Mountcastle, obviously, with that injury, is going to need a reset 8 to 12 weeks, like we said. So he will come back, I'm sure, later in the season and provide that offensive performance that we've seen from him, too, in the past.
Yeah, and some of those metrics are just going to be what they are, right?
Yeah.
Like bat speed is just what your bat speed is, regardless of what your sample size is. But in terms of his offensive production, yeah, we haven't seen great things from Coby Mayo at the plate yet so far. He's only appeared in 11 games this season, sitting 147 with a 393 OPS. You need to be able to go through the growing pains. We have seen it with pretty much every single Orioles prospect that has come up. Jackson Holliday struggled when he first got here. Adley Rutschman struggled when he first got here. I would like to remind everybody about Colton Cowser, who came up in 2023, played 26 games, hit 115 with a 433 OPS, and then the next season comes back, puts together an outstanding year, and is the runner-up in American League Rookie of the Year voting. You need to let Coby Mayo go through the growing pains a little bit. It's unfortunate timing because Mayo has never really been given the opportunity to go through the growing pains that every young player needs to go through at the big leagues because it has always been win now mode. And right now the Orioles are in must win mode. And so you need Coby Mayo to progress and you need him to get better. But again, we have preached it with every single Orioles prospect, just patience with Coby Mayo. He's figuring it out, and the talent is undeniable. We have seen how good of an offensive profile he has in the minor leagues. He's going to figure it out, and he's going to start hitting. I'm not worried about it. He just needs to be able to go through the struggles and get the consistent opportunities, and that's the opportunity that he now has with Ryan Mountcastle on the injured list.
Yeah, and it's difficult, too, because last season when Mountcastle hit the IL as well, we were like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity for Coby Mayo, as much as it sucks to lose Mountcastle as they were trying to make that playoff push. Right now, you could say the same thing, where as much as it sucks to lose Mountcastle, this is probably the best chance for Coby Mayo.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is going to be difficult because it is a win or die, as dire as that sounds, a win or die type of season right now, or at this point in the season. At the same time, it is going to be the most important for Coby Mayo to kind of pull his own weight and prove himself in those scenarios as well.
Yeah, and he's going to have to do it eventually, right? This might not be ideal timing for Coby Mayo to go through those growing pains, but he's got to do it. And I'm sure he will, and I'm confident that he will. And
he's a competitor, too. We know his kind of personality where he's very competitive, and we've seen that in many scenarios. So I think that when he starts to get that like fire in him and know that he needs to prove himself and not feel as much pressure that, oh, Mountcastle's coming back in 10 days, I'm going to get dropped back down. Now he knows he has 8 or so weeks, if he gets that much time, to be able to prove himself. So this is best case scenario for
and
Mayo.
He's a grinder. He's going to work, and I'm excited to see Coby Mayo start to figure it out in the big leagues because I think it'll happen soon. All right, let's talk Heston Kjerstad. This is kind of a similar story to what we're talking about with Coby Mayo, where the talent is undeniable. We have seen it from Heston Kjerstad throughout every single level of the minor leagues. And he had an opportunity at the beginning of this season with Colton Cowser's injury to say, okay, here's a corner outfield spot close to every day. Go claim it. And there was every reason to believe that Heston Kjerstad would, and that this would potentially be a breakout season for him because we had seen him put up good numbers in the big leagues in the past. I mean, it was an OPS right around 750 in his first 2 years in the big leagues, but just struggled. The OPS was down to 566, and he gets optioned to AAA Norfolk with Cedric Mullins coming back. I think he just needs a reset.
Yeah.
And for Heston Kjerstad, like I said, the talent is there, but with Mullins back, with Cowser back, with Laureano back, and Dylan Carlson playing really well as of late, Heston Kjerstad is probably your 5th outfielder, and he's just not getting enough opportunities to bounce back from whatever slump he has been in as of late. I know he was hitting decently well over the last few games. He didn't get a start when the Orioles were out in Sacramento playing the Athletics. That's indicative of the kind of playing time that he was more than likely going to get, and that was before Cedric Mullins got back. So I think it makes the most sense for Kjerstad and for the organization to go back to AAA Norfolk, get a little bit of a reset. And if you have a question of, man, he's already mashed at that level, what does he need to prove? I don't think he really needs to prove anything offensively. I think there's something to be said for just hey, go back down to Norfolk where you're going to get everyday at-bats and just mash for a while. Get the confidence back up. Have a 950 OPS and a 300 batting average. We know he's capable of that. We've seen him do that before. So just go do it. And I think that could go a long way for his confidence. Maybe there's some mechanical tweaks there, but he is capable of being that kind of player, and maybe he just needs to go down to AAA Norfolk and convince himself that he can go do it again.
Yeah, and you mentioned that kind of 3-game spurt or whatever where he looked really good earlier in the month of June. He had 2 triples and a double. Yes, that was really good, but the whole season right now, he was just batting 192 on the season. So there really is... You've seen good sparks from Kjerstad, his bat, this season, last season before he got that concussion. It's definitely there from Kjerstad. We've seen it in the minor leagues. We've seen it in the big leagues. The defense has always been a bit of a question mark, and that is the biggest thing for his play at this point in time right now. And it was getting to a point where it's starting to hurt the squad a little bit. He's in the bottom 1% in outs above average, which is not where you want to be as an outfielder, especially when you have a guy like Ryan O'Hearn who can fill in an outfield spot, Dylan Carlson, Ramon Laureano who had just come back, Colton Cowser, Cedric Mullins, all of these guys who are coming back. When you know that someone like Heston Kjerstad is struggling on the defensive side of things, it makes sense to put your intended everyday outfielders in those positions and send Heston Kjerstad back down to figure it out offensively and defensively.
Yeah, and I think he can figure out both.
Yeah.
I don't think the defense is a lack of ability.
No.
Because if you look at his StatCast page, yes, the outs above average, as you mentioned, are not good. But he is in the 63rd percentile in sprint speed, and he is in the 65th percentile in arm strength. Those are kind of the two things that you need to be a good outfielder. Are you fast enough to get to balls that are hit, and do you have solid arm strength? Those are kind of the two metrics that you can look at and say, okay, he has the ability to do that. And it's just coachable stuff, I think. I think it's routes. I think it's reading the ball off the bat, because he has the athleticism and he has the arm strength. And so he just needs to be able to put it together. And the nice thing about going down to the minor leagues is that the priority there is development over wins and losses. And so you can put Heston Kjerstad in your outfield every day. I'm sure that he is going to be an everyday outfielder for the Norfolk Tides, because the priority is going to be getting him back to being a major league plus player. So you can put him down in your lineup every day for the Norfolk Tides, and the development is going to be the priority. He can work on swing changes down there, and if he does something funky with his swing because he's trying to adjust something and goes 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts, who cares?
Yeah.
You're in AAA at that point. The priority is your development. If he's working on something different in the outfield and he has 2 errors, who cares? It's because you are trying to fix things and work on your development. So that's the beauty of the minor leagues, and I think that's why it makes the most sense for Kjerstad to be down there at that point. Get every day at-bats, work on what you need to work on, and everybody in the locker room, and Tony Mansolino included, knows that this guy is going to be back up at some point, and he is going to be an important contributor down the stretch because he has too much talent not to be. But he's just got to work on some stuff.
Right, and I know that he's going to go into this whole going back down to Norfolk as a self-reflecting kind of thing, and he's going to think of it as, okay, I'm still confident in my abilities, I'm focusing on myself, I'm focusing on a self-reset, but at the same time, you're also kind of going to get a kick in the butt when you see Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian, you're playing with them in the outfield as well.
Dylan Beavers is having a whale of a season for Norfolk. Yeah.
Especially on defense, too. So he is going to be there, and Kjerstad, maybe, who knows, it could be like, okay, I really got to step up my game. Yes, I'm going to focus on myself. Those are the top priorities, but at the same time, I've got these guys also banging on the door to make it back up to the big leagues.
And yet, you're never safe in the big leagues. I mean, there is always somebody who is playing well, especially in this system. It seems like there's always somebody at AAA Norfolk that we can point to and say, man, that guy's having a really good year.
Right.
He's making a case to potentially be at the big league level. So from everything we heard from Tony Mansolino about this conversation, Heston Kjerstad took it like a pro, as we knew he would, and is, understanding of the move and the decision. And I'm sure he's going to go to AAA. And he's going to mash, and we're going to see him at some point again here soon. All right, let's go to the 2 big roster moves that have happened lately, and that is Jordan Westburg and Cedric Mullins returning. They both, I'm sure, are going to be everyday starters, close to everyday starters, and they are going to be a huge, huge boost. We already saw Jordan Westburg hit a home run yesterday in his first game back. He's probably going to be your everyday third baseman, with Jackson Holliday your everyday second baseman, and Gunnar Henderson your everyday shortstop. That is the infield that you dream about if you are an Orioles fan. And then Cedric Mullins back in center field. That's a huge boost as well, especially defensively, where he is a good defensive center fielder, and then it bumps Colton Cowser to a corner outfield where he is an elite defender. So the defense takes a huge, huge jump with Cedric Mullins. The bottom of the lineup does as well if Cedric Mullins is somewhere hitting 7, 8, 9. We saw him hit 9th yesterday.
Yeah.
That is a heck of a 9-hitter as Cedric Mullins there. And then Jordan Westburg, we have talked so much about his prowess hitting with runners in scoring position. He's the most clutch hitter on this team based on the numbers from last year. So getting these 2 guys back is a massive boost to the offense.
Yeah, I mean, you just take a look at the lineup and the batting order right now. You just feel so much more holistic with this Orioles lineup right now. And 2 guys, I mean, Westburg was a 2024 All-Star. You are getting back a guy who could have been a 2025 All-Star if he had been healthy from the get-go. Westburg, you could just tell, we've talked about this, his start to the season where it was rough in spring training, those weird like mattress back issues. Yeah. and then you come back to start the 2025 season and he goes for 0 for 30 at some big slump at one point in the season. So
he was not healthy.
He was not healthy, but you hope right now that you get him back at peak health performance. And just this guy, you mentioned the runners in scoring position, the clutch hitting. This is a guy that you need to have on this offense and this lineup when they have been struggling in those scenarios this season at points late in last season as well.
Yeah, Manso called Jordan Westburg the glue to this whole thing. And we asked Jordan Westburg about that yesterday, and he said, yeah, I'd probably call Mansolino a liar to his face because Jordan Westburg is just a very humble guy, but he kind of is.
Yeah.
He is a glue guy. Again, I affectionately refer to him as a baseball psycho. Like, you can tell that the guy just lives and breathes this game. And, those two guys, Jordan Westburg and Cedric Mullins, Westburg is not the most vocal guy in the world. He is a leader by example. We have heard so much about how Cedric Mullins has taken on a bit more of a vocal leadership role this year. So on the field, it is a massive get to have both of those guys back in your lineup every day. But in the clubhouse, too, having Jordan Westburg and Cedric Mullins there, two leaders on this team, that's huge for a team that just is trying to find their way. They're trying to figure things out day in and day out. And so to have these two back, it just means a ton on and off the field.
And we also talked about the runners in scoring position struggle too, but there's also been a huge need to mash lefty pitchers this year. And yes, Jordan Westburg has reverse splits, but he's still hit 744 OPS against left-handed pitchers last season. That's almost an 800 OPS against lefty pitchers.
Right.
And so regardless of the reverse splits, because he had an 809 OPS against righties last season, regardless of the reverse splits, you still get someone who was hitting a near 800 OPS against left-handed pitchers when you don't necessarily have someone like that this year.
Yeah, and the funny part is, too, Cedric Mullins, who has struggled against lefties for most of his career, is hitting 289 with an 885 OPS against left-handed hitters this season. And I think there's a lot to be said for splits and how you want to match guys up and things like that. You're just getting two really good hitters back in the lineup. Jordan Westburg is probably your most well-rounded right-handed hitter, especially with Ryan Mountcastle out of the lineup at this point. And Cedric Mullins just a good hitter. I get the righty-lefty splits, and Jordan Westburg is a reverse splits guy, and Cedric Mullins has struggled against lefties in his career. Okay, I know the Orioles need help against lefties. You just get good hitters back. That's more important than anything else to me.
And Cedric had a really rough May, but his March and April were insane.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt in my mind that he can get back to those numbers, especially when he's had a little bit of a reset for himself in terms of health-wise and physicality-wise. So I think that he will also, in no doubt in my mind, go back to the player offensively that we know he can be. Same with Westburg. All of these guys who have been struggling with injuries and maybe hiding it themselves a little bit, because both of them, as we know them to be, are ball players and will probably try to go out on the field every single day when they shouldn't.
Yeah, we know what Cedric Mullins is, right? If he's probably going to end the year with a 725, 750 OPS, right around where he is right now, and he's going to play good defense in center field, and he's going to be a 3 or 4 WAR player. That's a really valuable guy to have on the team. And even if he's not, your 2-hitter, 3-hitter like he was at the beginning of the season, if he is your 7, 8, 9 hitter with a 725, 750 OPS playing good defense in center field, that's a really valuable player to have. Jordan Westburg is going to hit towards the top of the lineup, and, maybe he'll put up similar numbers that he did last year, and that was an all-star caliber player. So massive to get those guys back. Ramon Laureano is a really important piece to have back as well. He's maybe been the second best hitter on this team this year. Good defense in the corner outfield as well. A right-handed bat that the Orioles really need in the absence of Ryan Mountcastle. So those are really, really important pieces for an offense that needs some pieces back. We saw them put up 7 runs in their win on Saturday against the Athletics. It's the first time they had scored more than 5 runs since May 21st. This is a good offense. It's a talented offense. We just haven't seen them put up the kind of production that we are accustomed to seeing them put up over the past few seasons. And so much of it has had to do with injuries. where you don't have Westburg or Kauser or Mullins or Laureano or Mountcastle. You just haven't had a full strength lineup in a while. And I know Mountie is still out and you're still waiting for Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez to get back. Those are important pieces too. But you're at least getting closer to back to full strength. Tyler O'Neill is going to help in the middle of this lineup. Gary Sanchez is a good backup catcher. But at least you feel close to back.
Yeah.
Yesterday's lineup, you were like, okay, I see it.
Yeah, the
1 through
lineup
9
looked good.
Yeah, you see it 1 through 9. You see what this team can be offensively, and I know they didn't have a great day at the Dish. They're playing a Detroit Tigers team that's one of the best pitching teams in all of baseball, but the lineup is at least getting back to it.
Yeah, just getting Kauser, Westburg, Mullins back, and Laureano for that matter, like you mentioned, he's probably one of the best hitters on this team this season, is huge for the trajectory of the rest of the season. You hope that they can all stay healthy and get back to the potential that we all know that they can be. I think we're also starting to see a little bit of some guys also already getting back to who they are supposed to be. Adley Rutschman is one of them. He went over 3 last night, but got a sac fly in June. He's batting .370 with a 1049 OPS. Gunnar Henderson has not been great against left-handed pitchers this season, but there was a really great sign to see Gunnar get an RBI off of a lefty last night in the 3rd inning. Only his 3rd RBI against a lefty this season.
Yeah.
So that was huge to get him back into starting to progress against lefties, where last season he did extremely well against left-handed pitchers with a 257 batting average and an 829 OPS last season.
Yeah, and you need all the help you can get against lefties.
You need Gunnar to get back to how he was last season.
Yeah.
And hopefully last night was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, this team, they've got to hit lefties. It's no secret at this point. They are the worst hitting team in baseball against left-handed pitching, according to team OPS. A large part of that is due to the fact that they are missing Tyler O'Neill, who is a lefty masher in his career. I know O'Neill hasn't been great this season when he's been on the field. I think those numbers are going to get back to the normal Tyler O'Neill that we are accustomed to seeing. Obviously, you're missing Ryan Mountcastle as well for an extended stretch here. That hurts too. You were missing Ramon Laureano for a bit. You were missing Jordan Westburg for a while. It's a lot of good right-handed hitters that you don't have in the lineup, and the Orioles need to figure it out against lefties. I don't think there is a specific approach thing going on. I think most hitters would probably tell you that it's a similar approach in their work day-to-day for them, whether it's a right-hander or a left-hander on the mound. Obviously, it changes a little bit your approach in the box if it's a right-hander or a left-hander, but day-to-day work, I don't think there's something that really can be done of, okay, we are having a hard time hitting lefties, but we're hitting righties decently well. You've just got to figure it out. And I think Tyler O'Neill getting back will be huge, as I mentioned, but it's not a great lineup against lefties at this point. And
Jackson Holliday, he's done well against lefties this season. He is still very early on in his career for going up against lefties. So it is still a work in progress for Jackson Holliday to go up against lefties, but you like to see him getting everyday reps.
Yeah, had a homer against the lefty last weekend.
Going up against left-handed pitchers. So that's a really good sign. Ramon Arias is always a good option against right-handers and left-handers. It's only 31 at-bats, but a .322 batting average against lefties. Ramon Arias will always be a good option in that infield.
Yeah, I am kind of curious to see what Ramon Arias' playing time looks like as well, because Jackson Holliday has established himself as an everyday player at second base. He is your leadoff hitter. He has put together a really, really nice season. Jordan Westburg at third base was an all-star last year. He is an everyday player. I think at the beginning of the season against a left-handed pitcher, for example, you could move Jackson Holliday to the bench. You could put Jordan Westburg at second base and Ramon Arias as your starting third baseman. But Jordan Westburg's an everyday player. Jackson Holliday is an everyday player. Gunnar Henderson is an everyday player. I wouldn't be shocked to see Ramon Arias a little bit at first base as well. He is a good enough defender where you can bounce him pretty much everywhere on the infield diamond, and he is getting some pregame work at first base as well. I would not be shocked to see him get a start over there. He has had a few starts at first base in his career, and we know that Kobe Mayo is still kind of figuring the big leagues thing out. So it wouldn't shock me to see Ramon Arias at first base every once in a while, but he's a good player, and you want to get him in the lineup. And the Orioles are in the midst of a consecutive stretch here of games played where they have 16 days in a row with a baseball game. So guys are going to need days off. Jordan Westburg, just coming back from injury, I'm sure is going to need a few days of rest here and there in this stretch. Jackson Holliday will as well. It's 16 games in a row. Guys are going to need a day off. So Urias will find his way into the lineup. But he's a good player, and to cut his playing time down kind of out of necessity because you need to play Holliday and Westburg back is an interesting situation.
Right, and even if you don't get his Gold Glove defense on the field, at least you could get his bat as a designated hitter.
We saw him as a pinch hitter yesterday.
Right, he's already been designated hitter 3 times this season, which is a season high for him in his career. He's never gone more than that, so this early in the season we're probably going to see him a little bit more at designated hitter just because you know that there's not that much space and maneuvering for him in the lineup at a position. So we could see him more in that situation. Like you mentioned, first base, if Kobe Mayo needs a break, you could have Ryan O'Hearn at DH or vice versa, Ramon Urias at DH if Ryan O'Hearn goes at first base.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable guy to have as just a fielder too. Like if you want to give Jordan Westburg a day off, but he's just your designated hitter and he doesn't need to extend himself on the field as much, just put Ramon Urias at third. The same thing can be said for Jackson Holliday. So he can bounce into the infield anywhere, and if you want to give one of your position players half a day off by being a designated hitter, then Urias can just kind of be wherever you need him to be there. So curious to see how that shakes out, but there have been a lot of roster moves, and this is a team that looks pretty different right now for the better, I would say. I think, as we talked about, Heston Kjerstad is going to be back at some point, but could use a valuable reset in AAA Norfolk, and it's exciting to get Westburg and Mullins and Laureano back. We already saw Colton Cowser come back last week. That's been a huge boost. He has been awesome since returning from the injured list, and hopefully here soon, we are going to see Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez as well. Tyler O'Neill at his best when he is healthy is a middle-of-the-lineup right-handed slugger, and the Orioles could really, really use that as a left-handed pitching masher. Gary Sanchez is a good backup catcher. I know he started the season slow, especially against left-handed pitching as well. That is a good player. We'll see if we get them back at some point this week. Tony Mansolino said it was a possibility, but all of a sudden, with Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez coming back, this is a healthy-ish lineup. I know you're still missing Mountcastle and Mateo, but You'll take that that point from the injury front. With all due respect to Mountcastle and Mateo, if those are the only 2 guys that are injured, you would look at that position player group and go, wow, only 2 big injuries? That's great.
It's what you
That's where we are right now.
It's what you had intended for the lineup to be in the off season. So
hopefully
you can get those guys back. And I know we've talked a lot about offensive ways to better the season, but also on defense, you cannot be giving up some sloppy errors to teams like the Athletics. So, and we've talked a lot this entire season about how that's a domino effect where if starting pitching looks rough, then the offense looks rough, and then defense starts to commit some errors. So it all just needs to be cleaned out, and especially on defense, even if there is a rough start from the starting rotation, the offense needs to be able to pick it up, and the defense also needs to be able to pick it up and not give up errors.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the offense, but Jordan Westburg and Cedric Mullins are 2 good defenders.
Yeah, and Colton Cowser, too.
Again, we talked about the ripple effect in the outfield with Mullins back in center that pushes Cowser to a corner outfield where he is elite. So that's a really good defensive outfield if you're talking about Mullins and Cowser and Laureano or O'Neill in the corner outfield. That's a darn good defensive outfield. But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of the Bird's Nest.
You need to get some runs in today so that you're feeling good before going up against Tarek Skubal, though, on Thursday.
The Orioles have struggled against lefties, and Tarek Skubal is pitching on Thursday. So
get something going today
figure it
beforehand.
Out a little bit. Yeah, a big series here against the Detroit Tigers. This is a massive, massive test. The Tigers are the best team in baseball record-wise, and you would love to take 2. Got to take 1 if you're going to stay in the hunt here. So we would love to see you at Camden Yards this week for the Orioles homestand, but thank you so much for tuning in to this week's edition of the Bird's Nest, an hour early if you tuned in with us on YouTube, but we are live every week on YouTube at 11 a.m. We promise to try to be back at 11 next week. I will be in Tampa Bay, so I'll be Zooming for that podcast, but we're going to try to be live once again, or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Claff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.